The Biden administration is asking for an additional $33 to $40 billion that they want to send to Ukraine for military equipment, specifically weapons and armored vehicles. That's where most of it is going. But the truth is, this equipment is going to some of the worst people in the world. Actual Nazis, not neo-Nazis, actual World War II Nazis and Nazi brigades in Ukraine. Now, before you say, wait a minute, Ben, there's no proof that there are actual Nazi brigades in Ukraine or that the US is working with them. Guess what? There's a lot of proof, and I'll show it to you today. I wish this were not the case, but it is. I'm Ben Swann. This is Truth in Media. Hey guys, welcome to the show. A lot to get to today, and we want to start today actually with a question. Why is it that every time the United States gets involved in some kind of war or conflict around the world, we always seem to back the very worst people possible, the worst of the worst? In Libya, it was Al-Qaeda and Al-Qaeda fighters that we released from prisons and sent them to Libya to overthrow the government there. We know what Libya looks like today. Open slave markets on the street where you can buy a man for $30 there today. That is the world that we created by backing the worst people. In Syria, it was ISIS fighters. ISIS, of course, becoming the most powerful Islamic militant group in the world at one point, only because the United States not only funded them with money and trained their fighters, but provided them massive amounts of weapon after the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And specifically those wars in Iraq, we left behind huge amounts of military equipment, as we just did in Afghanistan with the Taliban. Every time we go to one of these places, we create chaos by funding the worst people. In Ukraine, we're doing it again. But this time, it's not Al-Qaeda or ISIS, it's Nazis. Yes, actual Nazis, not neo-Nazis, but World War II era Nazis who have continued to flourish there and are being funded and trained and provided weapons by the United States. This is our MO everywhere we go. How bad is it? It is really bad. So bad that in December of last year, when the United Nations General Assembly adopted a resolution to condemn Nazism, there were 130 countries that voted in favor of condemning Nazis. And guys, there were only 2 countries that voted against condemning Nazis. Can you guess which 2 countries? The United States and Ukraine. We're going to show you the evidence of how the US has been funding and backing those Nazis in Ukraine in just a minute. But before we do, a shout out to our partner for this episode, finestknown.com. Did you know that wealthy individuals and even investment firms are buying up rare coins? They're doing it to hold on to wealth and to watch the value of those items grow. Finest Known has an offer for you today to own your own unique and rare coin. If you go to finestknown.com/swan, you can own a piece of Civil War treasure that was lost at sea for only $129. Plus you'll receive this book, Lost Gold of the Republic. Again, this is a special offer just for our viewers. Check it out today at finestknown.com/swan. So back to this story. The Biden administration, as we've been telling you, is requesting some $33 to $40 billion to send military equipment into Ukraine at a moment when Americans can't find baby formula on the shelves of grocery stores. We're sending $40 billion worth of weapons to Ukraine. But it's not just generically going to Ukraine or the Ukrainian military. The specifics of this are very important because the main group that's receiving these kinds of weapons and is being trained by the US are Nazi battalions operating inside of Ukraine as they have been for decades. The request includes more than $20 billion for military equipment like artillery and armored vehicles. So how long has this been going on? Well, the truth is the United States has actually been training Nazi battalions in Ukraine for about 8 years now. Long before this latest war between Russia and Ukraine, long before that took place, the US has been training and arming Nazi battalions, again, since 2015. According to a recent Yahoo News report, since 2015, the CIA has been secretly training forces in Ukraine to serve as, quote, insurgent leaders, in the words of one former intelligence official, in case Russia ends up invading the country. Current officials are claiming that training is purely for intelligence collection, but the former officials Yahoo spoke with said that the program involved training in firearms, cover and move, and camouflage, among other things. And the United States has also been openly training Ukrainian military, including members of the Azov Battalion, which is an openly Nazi battalion inside of the Ukrainian military. No one even denies that these guys are Nazis. They proclaim it loudly. They are not ashamed to be Nazis, and yet the United States government and military has been covertly training them. Members like Sergeant Ivan Kharkiv, who reflected fondly on his, quote, battalion's experience with U.S. trainers and U.S. volunteers quite fondly, even mentioning U.S. volunteer engineers and medics that are still currently assisting them. Quote, our vetting screens for human rights violations, not for ideology. A U.S. embassy representative in Ukraine told the Daily Beast. The battalions that are in question have been integrated as part of Ukraine's National Guard, so the idea is that they would be eligible for training. Again, the standard is about human rights violations, but not about ideology. Now, this might be a whole separate episode, but the truth is that's an enormous problem. When the United States military goes into countries and begins training groups and providing weapons to them, not worried about what their ideology is, it leads to more problems down the road. As the Gray Zone has reported, a photo posted on the Azov Battalion's website in November of 2017 shows a U.S. military officer meeting with an officer from the neo-Nazi battalion. A year before the exchange, the U.S. Embassy in Kiev helped coordinate the transfer of rocket-propelled grenade launchers to the Ukrainian military in 2016, a portion of which were immediately sent to the Azov Battalion. Again, you're not screening for ideology, and so we're providing immensely powered weapons to groups that are openly Nazi groups that have an ideology and also have a declaration that their goal is to kill off anyone who is not part of their white superior race in Ukraine. That is their ideology. We don't screen for ideology, our military says, and so we openly provide weapons to some of the worst people in the world. One figure linked to the Centura organization posed from the U.S.-Canada training facility in the west of Ukraine with two black U.S. service members geotagging himself in Zimbabwe and writing 1488, a neo-Nazi code for Heil Hitler and a reference to the white supremacist 14 words. That same day, photographs appeared showing the neo-Nazi Azov Battalion receiving a shipment of Western instructors and in-law grenade launchers from NATO countries. The National Corps, the political wing of the Azov Battalion, also posted photos of in-laws its members received, explaining that they were, quote, mastering them. Quote, we will send Rusny to hell, they declared. The reality is there is a mountain of evidence here that the United States is not just funding one or two groups in Ukraine and that somehow a few kind of sparse fighters who are also Nazis are also benefiting from that training. There is actually evidence that the United States is focused on specifically funding and training those neo-Nazi battalions and the Nazi battalions. And the reason for that is very simple, because this is par for the course. It's what we do. We go into all these countries around the world and we seek out and choose the worst of the worst people because we're trying to create insurgencies. It is a battle by proxy. Instead of the United States just declaring war, we're using proxy groups in order to wage those wars, but they are terrible people. And the problem is that if we look back at history, we know how this plays out. The United States in the 1970s and 80s, what do? We armed a group called Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan in order to fight the Russians at that time. It was only a few decades later that we were fighting Al-Qaeda ourselves for the next 20 years and completely upending the entire Middle East in our effort to fight Al-Qaeda, who, by the way, today is as strong as they have ever been and as well funded as they've ever been. It was because of the fighting with Al-Qaeda that ISIS formed, was created, was armed, and was funded. That group, even though they have been mostly smashed at this point, still retains large amounts of weapons throughout the Middle East. And now we, of course, have armed once again the Taliban in Afghanistan by leaving behind massive amounts of weapons. This is the game plan. We've done this so many times before. It is the theory that the enemy of my enemy is my friend. You've heard that adage before, but here's how it really plays out. The enemy of my enemy suddenly in the future becomes my enemy, and we continue to stay in this cycle. Guys, thanks for watching. So much information on our social media platform, sovereign.media. You can check it out today. So much going up there. But also, if you're not getting our reports when they come out, send me a text at the number on your screen, and we will get these reports to your inbox on your mobile device. It's the best way to get around social media censorship. I'll see you next time.